Another thing, and this was one of the areas that got most debate, was how important electric mobility will be in 10 years' time. Clearly, there's some people who are saying it's going to be huge, and some people who are saying it's going to be really small. If you take together all the different views that we've got, we end up with a perspective that round about 10% of the vehicle fleet globally will be electric by 2010. But that'll be higher in some countries than in others. So the three countries that people talk about it being probably higher than elsewhere are, one is France, one is Germany, and the other one's China. And the reason for France is the fact that they've got lots of nuclear energy, which is clean fuel, so that as they move into electric mobility, they're going to get lots and lots of credits from a carbon perspective. People look at Germany and say, well, why is it going to be big in Germany? It's because the German government is putting so much money into it, and all the German car companies are aiming that 1 in 4 vehicles that they sell in 2020 will be electric. And then the other bit about China is something that you get lots of articles around. Some people say that the US is going to be significant, and other people say China. But generally, as we talked about it, people said, no, we think China. And the reason why they thought China is that the US is quite slow to react and has a lot of existing companies who don't want to move that quickly. And whereas China's got an opportunity with, if you just look at what's happening with the motorbikes, it's got lots of opportunity just to create new stuff. There's very little legacy. So the opportunity for China to embrace electric mobility is there and is seen as a very strong thing. Another related thing, and this one also starts to promote the idea of changing business models, is that we're seeing in lots of areas organizations moving to leasing products rather than selling products. Now, the one in the picture that's easy to understand is bicycles, which has taken off, and it's moved from Paris around the world, where the Paris mayor first started it going. But you think about this moving into other areas, you can see it in cars. You can see with things like Zipcar and Streetcar that people want to just have a car for a short amount of time rather than a long amount. But also you can see it in strange areas like Levi's jeans, which you might think, well, what's he talking about with Levi's jeans? But they require so much water to make the cotton to go into every pair of jeans that environmentally it's better for the Levi's to be able to take those jeans back rather than get thrown away. So you'll find people like Levi's starting to rent jeans to you for 2 years, but they'll take it back. And Samsung are talking about a world where laptops are a commodity that they lease to you rather than that they sell to you. So if you think about that, it has some big implications. Another topic that came, and you can see this coming from many different areas, is the idea of people being tracked by where their mobile phone is. Now, 4 or 5 years ago, people used to get a little bit spooked about this. They used to think this was the world of Big Brother. They used to think that maybe this is the world of the secret services and the military. And yes, for the past 20 years, they've been able to track where you are, by your mobile phone. They can do that within about 20 centimeters, and they can do that whether you've got your battery in or not in the phone. And that's the scary bit about it. But the really interesting bit about it is how we've ignored all that, and we've said, location-based services on our iPhone? Yes, please. Where's the nearest Starbucks? I want to know. Where are all my friends? Tell me. 6,000 apps just on the iPhone rely on location-based services. So this means enormous amounts of information is not only being shared by everybody, but can therefore be used by everybody. And then another thing, and this sort of relates to the same topic, one of the things that Google said when we talked to them was that the big problem going forward is not going to be a lack of information, it's going to be too much information. And people are not going to be so interested in the actual information itself as where that information came from. So the idea of credible sources of information are going to be more and more important. Now you can see this now where you go to, again, if you go to the States, more people trust Wikipedia than trust CNN. So there's a trust thing that people trust something that's effectively a whole load of amateurs just sort of putting their ideas together than a professional news organization. Now, when you bring that forward in time, you say, okay, well, which are going to be the brands that people trust to get information from? They may not need to be the brands that actually own the information, but who's the source is going to be more important. And that's going to be a point of differentiation. And then sort of coming to the last couple of points, one of the things that if you take all the last couple of things together, the idea of being able to make more informed choices about what types of transport we use, whether it's with freight, whether we're shifting from large trucks to small trucks, and when we're doing that switch, or whether it's us as individuals, whether we're choosing to use a car, go on a transit, use a bike, we'll be able to make more informed decisions about how best to navigate our way through cities. And one big area where this is really important is an area that people call the last mile. It could be called the first mile, depends which way you look at it, but it's that distance between where your home and the transport system, or where you work and the transport system. And this is really critical because this is one of the big barriers in the world of mass transit is getting people to get to the local train station or the local hub. Or one of the big opportunities in the world of personal mobility is actually bridging that gap or competing with a better solution for the hassle of getting to the train station and then going by train and then the hassle of getting to work. The last thing I wanted to sort of just say, because it's quite an important bit about this, one of the questions you could have is, you've been talking a lot about cities. Why is that so important? And there's three elements here. First of all, more and more people living in cities, so clearly they're becoming a center of attention. Secondly, cities are generally where stuff happens first, so you tend to see things starting in one city and being adopted by another. But thirdly, cities themselves are becoming more important. People talk about the idea of city-states. Now, clearly here we are in Singapore, which is a city-state. But if you go to 2020, people see probably about 100 cities around the world that act effectively in their own self-interest. And there's more to connect Shanghai and New York and Sao Paulo and Lagos than there probably is to connect New York with people in Idaho. There's more commonality going on there. So you'll see that cities start to compete with one another, but you'll see also that stuff happens more. And so there's the idea of city mayors being more important is very strong. So there's an organization called the C40, which is the mayors of the top 40 cities in the world. And many people see that it's the C40 who are more influential in changing things than the G20 when all the governments get together, because they can do things that get ahead quicker. So as we're going forward today, one of the things to think about in the how stuff happens and the opportunities to innovate, we need to think that there's a whole set of stuff that can happen within cities, and they're probably going to happen quicker. But we also need to remember that connecting between those cities in more efficient ways is also high on everybody's agenda. So I just want to sort of wrap up and just leave you with some thoughts which we're going to leave on the screen as we go into the next session. If we were to take all this information that we've heard from different organizations and what we know ourselves, what does it all mean? Well, the one thing that we know is that, as we said, there's more people on the planet, they're getting wealthier, so it means there's more freight and there's more travel of people. So that's good news. More people moving around, more stuff moving around. So we know that's good for us. However, we know that there's this big impetus to use less energy, to reduce congestion, and that probably means that in many parts of the world we'll have more regulation. So that's both an opportunity but also a bit of a challenge. What we can see is that in certain parts of the world, and lots of people are looking to Asia for this, that big steps forward, completely new ways of doing things will occur. So the idea of big steps forward in some locations, but not everywhere, is exciting lots of people. And as I alluded to with the bits about ownership, not access, and dynamic pricing, there's lots of opportunities to reinvent what we're doing today. New business models mean that we can deliver the same stuff, but deliver it in a different way that creates value and shares value in new ways. So bringing all that together, the great news is that that means lots of opportunities for innovation. And our challenge is to work out how are we going to lead that and how are we going to take advantage of that. So hopefully, with those in mind, and as I said, all the slides are on the wall at the back over there. As we go through the rest of the morning, there may be things out of what I've just said, maybe one or two little sparks that you can use and you can keep discussing and taking forward. So hopefully that sort of gives you a sense. I've tried to move you a little bit forward into the world in 10 years' time. Some of those things you will have agreed with, some of them you will disagree with. That's the intent. That's there for us to stimulate conversation and to build forward.